Do you want your teenager to go on the adventure of a lifetime, all the while learning the ability to know God's truth, discern wisely, and take godly action in the world? My name is Andrew Hawk, and I'm the camp director at the Excel Summer Leadership Camp. Every summer, we take teenagers on 2-week adventures to help them grow in their leadership, discernment, and Christ-like character. Between camping, rock climbing, hiking, and whitewater rafting, campers build lifelong friendships while also training in Excel College's game-changing critical thinking method. They'll learn to filter through the cultural messages of the day with godly wisdom, and to learn how to apply those in the method in real-life context through wilderness first aid and CPR training. A few months ago, I received a message from Melissa, one of our past campers. When her mom and her were overseas, her mother got injured, and she used her training to make a huge difference, according to doctors, to be able to get help when it was needed. We love to hear stories like this. Not only do campers leave with practical skills, but also with a deeper faith in Jesus and lifelong community. I want to personally invite your teenager to join us this summer by going to theexcelcamp.org to learn more. That's theexcelcamp.org.
Dadville. Yeah. Hi, I'm Dave Barnes.
And I'm John McLaughlin.
And welcome to Dadville.
Dadville is a podcast where we talk about life, love, and the pursuit of awesome dadding.
It's funny thoughts and deep talks.
So please, enjoy your time here in Dadville and enjoy this episode with
Michael Chandler.
Take this stuff.
Okay, so we've started, just so you know.
Perfect. We're in.
So, yeah, we're in. And I just want to start. John and I were talking about this earlier. We have been working on this interview for a decade.
We have.
It feels like a decade.
We have, and I would like to apologize. I would like to take this moment to apologize.
Okay.
Let's not anger.
Never mind, start it over.
Right off
no
the top.
apologies.
Did you hear that? Talk about the one guest we've ever had that we don't want to make.
Piss them off. We don't have questions. We just have compliments. We don't want to make you upset.
I'm actually like the biggest lover, biggest softy, like non-confrontational guy probably in the sport.
God.
Confrontation scares me, but if you put me inside of a cage and lock it, competition, and you pay me for it, I will try to rip your head off.
You know what's funny? I feel like we have friends in our space that are kind of the same. It's like they don't like being the center of attention, but then they get on stage and it's like, they're in their element.
I would definitely liken it to that because I think I've met some guys. Like I know some people in the music industry and they're just like real outgoing and that, but then there's the real quiet ones.
Ton of introverts.
But then they just absolutely rip it up on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, except mine's a little bit different because it's like real
violent,
angry and violent and bloody. And
we like to think, John and I are on our toughest days. We like to think that music is a contact sport.
It's pretty much the same thing. I mean, there's much overlap.
You sweat. It's active.
Yes, thank you.
Not too active, though.
Not too active.
Right.
Not too active.
Nobody wants to be too active.
There's nothing like a good brain workout at the end of a set where you're just like mentally tired. That's as close as we get to what you do.
That's right.
It's just a good mental tiredness.
Yeah. A lot less like punching in the face.
Yeah.
I would say.
All the crowds can do that.
Not completely void of it.
You haven't had mosh pits at the...
John and I's music doesn't exactly draw the...
You guys don't induce mosh
just
pit?
The slowest mosh
pit. They're not mosh pit inducing
Induce mosh pits.
Like a mosh pit of couples.
Just gently,
just like
sort of like trying not to
Can
hurt
I
each
say,
other.
I think this is hands down our longest
I was going to say
sheet.
the same thing.
I mean, there's
really?
no way you could read this brag sheet.
Yeah.
I hope it's all true.
Yeah, so for those who are listening, we have Mike Chandler here with us. And this... I had the exact same. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that I think that's one of the funniest things you've ever said on Dadville a few seconds ago. We don't have any questions. We just have compliments.
We don't want to go. We don't want to go too deep.
I really think that's one of the funniest
pretty
things you've ever said. That got me really good. That really got the giggles. Okay, but Mike, for real, this is like probably one of the. So we start every Dadville with what we call the brag sheet, and it's I've counted 7 times down on my phone. It's incredible. So I'm going to try to sort of sum all this up. Okay. I like where it starts. Northwest High School's most valuable wrestler, 2004. Walked on to the University of Missouri wrestling team, which I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up, by the way?
High Ridge, Missouri. So right outside of St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, you're from Missouri?
From Missouri.
Okay, I didn't know that.
My wife, too. She's from Columbia, Missouri.
Yeah. Did y'all meet at Missouri?
We did, and we met after I graduated.
Okay.
But she's from there. Her dad still lives there. Yeah, it's a great Dadville story. So we'll talk about it.
Okay, cue it up.
Great.
We'll get there.
Someone cue it up.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so wrestled in college, ton of accolades there. Then gets into MMA. I do want to add, majored in personal finance management and real estate for anybody who does have that need.
Yep.
reach out to you?
No,
you can help them.
Not really.
Which we just skipped over like 3 paragraphs.
Literally, I know.
Just for the
It's
listener.
That's fine. Okay, 3 times Bellator lightweight champion, 1 Bellator. Is that Bellator?
Bellator.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Season 4 lightweight tournament. Currently the number 7 ranked UFC lightweight. That's insanity to me. Ton of NCAA awards. I mean, there's just a lot. MMA awards. There's so many. I don't know. What do I do, John? Do I read all these?
It's just like 4, like for the listener, take your phone out, open up a note, and just like scroll with your finger, like violently scroll.
Yeah.
It's like 4 of those worth of awards. Done. That's
honors.
That's how we sum it up.
I tell you what is really interesting to me is the awards, which this would make sense, but I never would have thought about this before this. Is so many of these awards are Fight of the Year awards, which is really cool to think about because obviously it would be a fight. Like that's how you would qualify an award.
Yeah.
Is like, but it's tons of these. Like it's like,
and is that like to equate it to music or whatever? Is that like getting like Song of the Year or something like is that the coveted award
that's a
you want to
great
get?
question.
I would say so, except for Song of the Year is only an accomplishment, right? Or it's only a win.
Well said.
Whereas
Well said.
I've had fights of the year that I've won, and I've also had fights of the year that I've lost.
Yeah.
But as we'll kind of get into, my kind of idea of this whole thing is like it, just like anything in life, it's like there's the wins and the losses, but how do you make people feel, right? What makes people feel something, whether they're in the arena, whether they're watching on pay-per-view, right?
Bro,
so it's one of those things where
I love that.
But it's very easy for people to be like, oh, well, he doesn't really care about winning, he's a loser. So, but it's like, no, it's like we're all on this constant quest to make people feel something and find the best version of ourselves. And then sometimes it's through a win, and sometimes it's through a loss, and sometimes it's magical no matter what.
Can I ask a really cheesy question? This feels like it's going to be like a Disney Channel question, but like do you feel like in the losses, because like we all take losses, right? To your point, like in our career and whatever career, do you feel like those you have bigger takeaways from those than you do the wins, or do you feel like you can really sort of gain the same amount of knowledge from both?
I think you learn more from the losses physically and stylistically and tactically and all of these different X's and O's of the fighting thing, but you also learn a lot of things about yourself, right? Because it's not about who you are when you win and at the top of the mountain and you walk out of the arena and you kiss your wife, you collect your paycheck, and everyone's like, Michael, you're the man. It's the times when it's like, hey, you're not going to do the press conference. Hey, you need to go to the hospital. Hey, you get home and you bring your bags back and you sit down on the couch and you just start crying and you're like, all of this emotion, that's when you find out the most about yourself, right? And I think I've learned so much more about myself through the losses. And then also while doing that and the way that you do it gracefully or not so gracefully at times, and you learn through that, like so many people, whether they're your biggest fans or they're people who are your biggest haters, they still, even if they don't admit it, they admire you for the way that you handle the losses more than the wins, especially in fighting in your underwear with no shirt on in the middle of a cage and like in front of millions of people. I mean, that's like the most exposed you can be in sports. So I think, you learn a lot through the losses.
You know what you just said that is, I've never thought about this. Like, this is kind of blowing my mind right now, but it would make so much sense because it is so physically exhausting. Don't get mad when I say this, especially you don't get mad. I've never thought how emotionally draining, or like in what am I trying to say? How emotional it would be too.
Oh gosh, it's so much more emotional than people think. Well, especially because you're like, okay, you show emotions in your songs and they're beautiful.
Oh,
and you're like, this
right.
guy's deep, man. He's emotional, right? Whereas like you watch me do what I do, and you're like,
it's like
blood coming down his face, and he's still like, come on, let's do more, and I want to freaking kill you. And you're like, he's like a superhuman. He's like,
he's void of emotion.
He's void of emotion. He's just a piece of meat with a heartbeat. But it's like, no, man, I'm actually a really deep thinking, deep feeling, emotional, loving creature, and I have to go through all of this. And then you also, in the world that we live in, it's like all the doubts and the insecurities and the haters and the highs and the lows and and it's just it's a crazy, crazy journey that I would never trade for in a million years. I would never want a different life, a different profession, because I truly believe God put me in the sport for a reason. Whether it's to better myself for the impact that I'm going to make after fighting, or whether it's while I'm fighting, making the impact I'm making while I'm fighting. But it's so emotional, man. It's like
so coming home, that happens a lot where you just sit down and it's like, I can sort of let that go.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a win, a lot of times it's like, okay, hey, I hit the target and I got the thumbs up and I got the hand raised and I got the thing. And now you're kind of thinking like human nature. Okay, what's next?
Yeah.
What's next? Everything's got to be. And then, but after a loss, it's oh shoot, how close am I to the end?
Wow.
You know, how close am I to that time when people stop talking about me? How close am I to that time when I'm going to have to hang them up? Okay, I lost this time. Does that mean I've lost it? Do I not have it anymore? Am I too slow?
Because I would imagine
too old,
so much of it would be. I mean, obviously, keep in mind I know nothing, but I would imagine a lot of it has to do with your mental capacity. Like if you go in thinking, I'm probably not going to win this one, you're probably not going to win that one, I would imagine. Like you would have to be like, I am going to win. Like I will destroy this person.
Yeah.
You know?
And what's really funny about even just my upbringing and how I grew up and my view of myself and my view of success and what success meant, what were the measures and the metrics of success, it was very much don't get too big, don't accomplish too much for the fear of making people feel insecure around you. Don't be the guy who walks into a room and sucks out the oxygen. Don't be the guy. Don't be bigger, better, more successful, more desirable than anybody else. So I've always, not always, I try to get that out of my vocabulary because I've turned into now, and I had this epiphany in this last camp, I've turned into a guy that the younger me would have hated because I didn't like when people walked into the room and they just had that confidence.
Wow.
They were just proud of themselves. And they walked in, they said what they meant and they meant what they said and their yes was their yes and their no was their no. And I was kind of a wandering generality more than like this meaningful specific of exactly who God created me to be. And I think I needed to be that in order to become this guy, to be able to have this platform, to be able to unlock that in other people. And it's really,
you are so articulate with this stuff. It's really impressive.
I've just had to study it, or else it was adapt or die for me. I mean, there's no way I would be where I am today have I not really studied the nuances and the deep layers of the human existence and failures and success and what it means and all of that, plus my walk with Christ, and then like being a father and a husband and all of these different things. It's like I got this saying that's like, I don't think we get old, I think we get lazy and we get busy. Because I think about this my 22-year-old self when I got into the sport, no wife, no kids, a mortgage because I just bought my first house, but like nothing, and I was like, God, I'm so busy. I got to do it. And I'm like, I look back at that 22-year-old who was quote unquote busy, and I'm like, dude, this is the least busy you will ever be in your entire life.
It's true. It's true.
And my mentor told me that because I was complaining to him one day, and he's like, Michael, enjoy this because this will be the least busy you'll ever be. And I'm like, no way, dude. Word. I got this, and I got this, and I got this. And he's like, yeah, just trust me. Give it 10 years.
I wish that I've had this exact thought specifically around parenting. Because my wife and I talk about, like, when we just had Luca or before we had kids, we felt busy. We were stressed about stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I so wish that I was a journaler. I wish I had journals that I could go back to and be like, what were the day-to-day thoughts? Because now in this, like, dad of two, one in middle school, this has got to be as busy as I'll ever be.
Yeah.
And I look back and I'm like, I know I was complaining about stuff. I know I was stressed. What on earth was I stressed about?
Yeah, I know.
You were. It's kind of like one of those things where people always say like, there's so many people out there that would trade your life for theirs, right? Or what you think it is, and what their stresses are, and the things that you ruminate and stew about that aren't even a big deal. But it takes, I think it's probably the human condition, right? It's like, and God continues to expand you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, if you ask the 22-year-old self to look in the future 15 years or whatever it is, however many years it is, it's like, hey, this is what you're going to have going on. I'm going to be out. That 22-year-old will be like, nope, I'm done. Pack it in. Like, there ain't no way I can do that because I can't even handle this.
Yeah.
This media article that just came out that was negative about me. And I'm like, it's like the little things.
Yeah.
There's so many. I don't know how to put this quite into a question, but there are so many nuances to what you do, just like there are with anything. Like I'm a big tennis fan, but before I got into tennis, it was just two guys hitting a ball back and forth. that's all it is. And then you get into it and you start to play and you start to see the nuances that are happening and the sort of like, okay, Sinner is taking this kind of approach, to playing Monfils because Monfils, this is his weakness, all that kind of stuff. There's a whole other game happening. And I don't, for me, I don't know anything about MMA. So I know that there are, as you said earlier, like there are the wins that you have and then there are the losses that you have. But those losses could have been a really great, performance, or lack of a better word. There can be some really great fights that happen that those who know can see some of the subtleties and all that kind of stuff. And on top of it, you've got, the contract that you signed or the contract that's coming to an end that you're thinking about. You've got that layers. You got who's in the crowd, all that kind of stuff. How many people are watching? Is there some way that you can sort of, to the people who don't know much about the sport, can sort of summarize some of those layers of nuance that maybe we are blind to? Yeah,
I mean, it's obviously like you said, from the physical standpoint, there's the X's and the O's, right? It's like your next fight, you're like, okay, this guy's an orthodox or a southpaw. Is he a kicker? Is he a puncher? Is he a grappler? Does he have great cardio? Not so great cardio? What are his strengths and weaknesses? There's the X's and O's.
So you're like studying film.
Yeah,
before.
Not a ton though, because I think, just like anything in life, I think that which we think about the most, either positively or negatively, could come to fruition, right? Like if I spent every day, I'm going to watch every single one of this guy's fights, and I'm going to break everything down, and I'm going to have somebody else come in and get their opinion. Don't get hit by this. Don't get hit by that. Don't let this happen. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy of what you thought about the most ended up happening.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I spend like 80% of the time just focusing on me. Yeah. Sound very selfish, but it's like, hey, this is who I am. This is how I'm going to be put in the best situation possible to be successful on fight night. This is what I do really well. This is what I know I need to work on. And these are the things that I need to think about with him, the opponent, and then we just train every single day. But it's, to your question, it's kind of like, it's so much less about the X's and O's than it is about the human being inside there, what they're going through, and the mind, and how the mind is connected to the body. You guys, if you've watched a fight, or anybody who's listening right now, the amount of times that we've watched fights and we've watched a guy just absolutely die, like cardio-wise, and you're just like, oh my gosh, did this guy even train at all? He looks in shape, but oh my gosh, his cardio is horrible. And then you start to realize the cardio is directly connected to the brain, which is connected to the heartbeat and the heart rate and all that kind of stuff. And a guy who's really, really well-trained physically, but not well-trained mentally, can just go straight from
that is fascinating
100 to 0. And it's kind of like you're locked into this octagon, and for 5 minutes straight, there's just nonstop opposition coming at you, and he's got one goal. And the training that you've done, or the training that you haven't done, the lack thereof, is going to show in that moment. Whether it's this huge fight or it's a tiny fight, it doesn't really matter. It's like this crazy, and that's why I love mixed martial arts, and why I truly believe I was called to this sport, is like, mixed martial arts is a metaphor for life, right? It's a metaphor for the fights that all of us are going through in every aspect of our life. And that's why the fans of it, whether they're big time fans or casual fans, they enjoy it, because you're watching this fight play out in the cage, and it's barbaric, but then it's also the nuances, and it's a crazy sport.
John,
Dave.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to
it's okay.
interrupt your dinner. But I saw you guys were eating. I just want to pop in and kind of tell you something really quickly.
Tonight's like kind of eat in bed night.
Oh,
it's a family thing, but we're glad you're here. What's up?
You and the Lennon family, they just loved it. The other day, I was buying some ramen from Momofuku. Okay.
As you do.
And I couldn't believe how smooth the transaction was.
Oh, nice.
So easy to buy. A great product.
Yeah.
I love when that happens.
Oh, bro, me too. I mean, there's so many good products out there, and businesses like that need to find a way. Sorry, it's hard for me to talk in bed.
You get so excited.
They need to find a way to set themselves apart, right? And getting products sold with smooth transactions. You hear that?
You know that sound.
I know that sound.
It's often the business behind the business. Or as we say it, the business behind the business.
That's right.
Making selling simple. And for millions of businesses, that's business. Guess what it is? Shopify. It's helping.
Dave, who does selling better than Shopify? Nobody does it, all right? Home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And I would argue all the planets, not just Earth.
That's the data we have.
All the other ones.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the data's coming in hot. Okay, so if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in the store, in outer space, in their feed, and everywhere in between.
Everywhere. Update your business and get the same checkout Momofuku uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial. I'm
that can't be
staring
real.
at the paper,
That
John.
can't
Is
be
it
real.
really $1 per month? It is. It's
almost 99
$1
cents.
per month trial period at Shopify.com/Dadville. All lowercase again, because I was giggling because John's funny. Shopify.com/Dadville.
I'll say it again. Go
All
to
lowercase.
Shopify.com/Dadville to upgrade your selling today.
Shopify.com/Dadville.
Wait, say it again. Just
No,
Dad.
No, take it.
Oh, they got it.
Oh,
Dave.
man. Yes.
Hey,
yes,
sorry to
yes,
scare you.
Sorry.
Wake up.
Yeah.
Listen,
Oh,
I
wow.
had to wake you because I love those threads.
Thanks, yeah.
You're looking, I would say high end. That's how I would describe
I was so
you.
excited about wearing these clothes that I slept in them, as you can see.
I don't think that's good for the
Can I tell
clothes,
you
but-
why I like them so much?
Please.
This cashmere sweater
Uh-huh.
and stretched wool dress pants. It's hard to say, but they feel so good to wear. Are from Quince.
I knew it.
But together, they're under. Take a wild guess how much they're.
I would pay $2,500,000.
They're under $200.
Shut
You
up.
are wasting your money, John.
Dave, how does Quince do it?
Mm.
How do they keep their prices 50 to 80% lower than similar brands?
John, I'm going to tell you actually because I know
Please.
this. They partner directly with top factories and cut out the cost of the
Get that
middleman.
middleman out of here.
Get
And
the heck outta
Quince
here.
only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel.
Oh, John, I have sweatpants, Henleys,
Yep.
cardigans, all from Quince,
All from
and
Quince.
they're all a perfect fit.
Listen, indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/Dadville for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. You heard me right. 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/Dadville to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Dadville. Well, you know, one of the things that, so John and I were talking about this before. We do about a 6-hour prep session that you just walked up on. And we were talking about this, like MMA is such a fascinating thing because I remember the beginning, I'm 46. I remember the beginnings of it and it was like this dark arts. Like I remember it was like, you know, it felt like you had to sneak to watch them.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, no holds bar, like guys literally trying to kill each other. And it was
No
like
weight classes
no
back
weight
in the-
classes, which was huge. But it felt like so like sinful.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, you know, like it was just dirty.
You're like, you wouldn't admit to people.
no,
You're like,
no,
oh, I like Mexican
exactly.
MMA.
And then it's
Yeah.
crazy because it feels like, I mean, and you know, I think to your point, if you'd talked to a 22-year-old I think you'd have had every right to be like, do people do that professionally?
Yeah.
Because it was still in its genesis, where now it's become this like hugely successful, respected sport. And I think something that's so funny as you talk about it is like you can watch some of those really, really old Gracie, like the old stuff, and there's no method. It's just two guys really kind of trying to kill
Just
each other.
brawling, yeah. Just brawling.
Where now it's been done so well for so long because of guys like you that it's so much more calculated. It's efficient. It's like it doesn't feel like I feel like some of those fights you watch. You're like, I feel like I've walked into like a bar,
Just a bar fight.
and
for
it's
sure.
just two dudes, just like they've almost abandoned any of their arts that they'd learned to just try to knock each other out.
Yeah.
Where now it is like it's almost like a dance. Like it's this really well done, well executed thing. So it's crazy. It has to be so crazy to be in a sport where you're like, I've kind of been on the front of this whole wave.
Yeah.
Where it went from like crazy debauchery to like this really incredible thing.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's cool too because every now and then these pictures will pop up of like, you know, the guy who's in his prime and he's like the world champion, and then there's this like young kid taking a photo with him, and then turns out that young kid has now been training for the last 15 years, and now he's in the UFC. And
Yeah.
it's, whereas before it was like, hey, I'm a tough guy. you're a tough guy. They're giving us an octagon to fight in, and they're going to pay us. Let's go at it.
Yeah.
Whereas now there's a 5-year-old kid watching right now whose dad's kind of an MMA fan or whatever, and he's like, someday I'm going to fight in the UFC. And I was like, okay, well, if that's your goal,
yeah,
we want to train every single day now for the next 13 years till I'm 18. I'm going to take my first pro fight, and I'm going to work my way up to get into the UFC. And it's become a lifestyle for people because now the sport's been around for 31 years.
Right.
And that's largely because of the UFC. What the UFC has done, single-handedly quarterbacking and championing the entire sport and turning it from fringe / a dirty sport to like, hey, we're on ESPN. And you could be watching the Super Bowl and well, maybe not the Super Bowl because it wasn't on ESPN, but you can be watching a football game, a very mainstream, socially accepted sport, and at the bottom there's a ticker that says, hey, this weekend don't forget to watch Chandler versus Poirier, you know, and the ticker down at the bottom, like, hey, new fight announcement, and it's on ESPN, and they're talking about it. So it's the social conditioning aspect of it with the promotion, and then also what the UFC has done. You got guys like, you know, there's some of us who were like, hey, I only had one option. I was going to fight. Yeah. And then you got other guys who were like, I didn't need to fight. I wanted to fight. Like, I truly believe God called me to hand-to-hand combat, and I've been doing it since I was 14 years old, and I've never looked across the octagon and been like, I want to kill this human being. Yeah, right. It's more just like, I see a head, I see a body, and I see arms and legs, and I know we're about to get into an octagon and fight. And it's it's so much more of a sport.
That's what's changed, because I feel like that's such a well-enunciated way to say it, because I feel like you would watch those old ones. Again, it was just like barbaric.
Well, yeah, and there was no rounds back then. I think it was like 15-minute rounds or something.
But now it's like you said, it's a sport. It's something that is so it's like people have taken boxing and made it and introduced other fights or fighting techniques to it. So it's no longer just like punching. Mm-hmm. Like there's grappling, there's kicking, but it's done in such a way that, like, you know, you can watch it and feel like you're watching just a much more interesting boxing match. Yeah. Where before it was like, you're kind of like, kids, you probably want to leave the room. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how this is going to go.
Well, and my son, Hap, who's 8 now, he's been to one of my fights, and thank God I won that fight. But, you know, so he hasn't been to one that I've lost yet, which I'm like, oh, gosh.
Is that in your mind when he's there? Are you like, my son's watching? This is the first fight my son has been watching.
I will say there was extra pressure on that one, which made me not want him to go anymore. Sorry, Hap, if we hear this someday. It's like, you know, like, I love my kids more than anything in the world, but it's also like, hey, what I do for a living, and I need to be in the best situation possible.
Yeah.
Right.
And it does add that extra layer. It's not even just like, hey, do I win? It's more like, hey, don't get your freaking arm broken or get knocked out or to where he thinks his dad is dead.
Man.
So how did he feel
crazy.
About it?
He loved it, but it's just so funny because my wife, I mean, we've been married for 10 years, so who knows how many fights we've been together now, 20 fights, you know, she's been to so many, and it's really funny because it's like, the thing about mixed martial arts too is it's like, it doesn't matter if you're 1,000-to-1 underdog or 1,000-to-1 favorite. It's like anybody's got a button where you could get knocked out.
That's right.
We call it like slip on a banana peel. Like, you can slip on a banana peel and make a mistake, and all of a sudden a fight's over, and you're like, how the heck did this happen?
Fast. Yeah,
there's no way I should have lost this fight.
Yeah.
So my wife understands this, and she's been with me through. I broke her in her first fight ever. I knocked this dude out in like 40 seconds. Didn't even get touched, and she's like, "Oh, this is amazing, right?" Then the next fight was like a 25-minute knockdown, drag out war. My face is turned inside out. I lost that fight, you know, and she's like, "Oh boy, this is what I signed up for."
Yeah.
You know, so to her, she's nervous as heck.
She's like, why didn't you just knock him out?
Yeah, exactly.
Just do what you did the first time.
She's nervous as heck, and my son Hap was there, and he's like, "Mom, what's the big deal? Why are you nervous? Like, Daddy's going to win. He's dad." It's like, I'm Superman, you know? Like,
yeah, of course.
We're Supermen to our kids, right? There's no way Dad can lose. And now, you know, he's known I've lost a couple times, and we talk about the big belt, he calls it. And last night we were laying in bed. I was putting him to bed, and he was like, "Hey, Dad, so how many fights away are you from the big belt?" And I'm like, "I don't really know, buddy," you know, but it's always like this big belt conversation, which is a really great thing to be able to tell your 8-year-old, because my response was like, "Hey, buddy, if it's in the cards, if it's God's plan for me to have the big belt, that's amazing. I love that's awesome. It's a really great accomplishment, but also, like, I've already got the big belt. You know who the big belt is? My big belt is your mom and you and Ace and your baby sister on the way and this house and this life that we get to live. Like, Daddy's already got the big belt, you know? So it's like it's a really cool thing to have your son watch the thing, and it's like, it's the accolades, but you're also kind of tying the knot between the accolades and also like real true significance, whether you win or lose type of thing. And it's it's he'll probably come to the next fight. I think the other night we told him he would probably come to the next fight. So we'll see.
Does it, doing what you do, does it affect, I mean, obviously it must have some effect, but how does it affect the way you sort of view the world? And like sort of the scenario I'm thinking of is like, you go into like a football game or a soccer game or something like that. I feel like ever since I was a kid, we talked about this on an episode with just Dave and I, where we talked about fighting. I have literally never been in a fight in my 42 years of existence. Never been in a fight. How many hours have I logged as a dude just thinking about...
Just be ready.
Just be ready.
Just be ready.
Yeah,
you
just
know?
be ready, man. Athletic stance.
Yeah,
Athletic stance.
Got to be an athletic stance.
Balls of your feet.
Uh-huh.
And this is, not only is it what you do for a living, but you're very well known in this space. So they're going to be, you go to a Nashville soccer game, there are probably going to be some guys there who recognize you, and that could go one of two ways. I mean, is it something that is in the back of your mind when you're in situations like that?
No, and it's funny actually because there's these certain questions you always get asked.
I'm so glad you're doing this.
Right?
There's
like these certain ones you always get asked. And you're like, well, I've had this one 1,000 times, but it's like, and so like the first question is like, hey, dude, how badass is it to walk into a room and know you could kick everybody's head? And I'm like, I've literally never walked into a room and had that thought.
Yeah.
I've never once walked in here and been like, okay, there's 312 people in here.
Yeah.
That guy's pretty big. That guy looks a little wiry, but you could probably take him down.
Right.
I've never had that thought, right? But it's a great question, right?
Yeah.
And then that's another question I get also too is like, hey man, you ever have anybody mess with you because they know, they're drunk or they're
Right.
feeling themselves and they're like, hey, I want to go challenge this guy, and I'm like, no, I haven't really had that either. I think going back to like, I was also a guy. I've never been in a fight that I haven't been paid for.
Wow.
I've never been in a street fight.
That's amazing.
Part of it too. I mean, I think we talked. I don't know if we were on air yet, but I'm like the most non-confrontational.
Yeah.
I was always like, be a good little boy. Don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Don't get written up at school. Get good grades. Like, be respectful. Like, don't be a bad boy. And maybe that's and that's probably why I'm a little benign to a lot of the mixed martial arts. Like the funniest thing that I've ever heard in my entire life pertaining to like a mean comment that someone said to me, because you get them all the time on the socials, is like, he's like, some guy just said, there's something about Chandler. He's not bad, but like, I prefer my fighters a little more questionable. Right. And I'm like, that's freaking hilarious. Like, there's just going to be people out there that are like, hey, I only like mixed martial arts for one reason.
Yeah.
And that's because I think these people are psychopaths.
Yeah.
And I want them to cuss and spit and fight. And that's it. And be very, very questionable. I'm like, well, that ain't me.
Yeah, that ain't me.
Right. Or
you have to think, it's like, I'm imagining, to your point, John, like if you went to an NSC game, you don't carry yourself, like people might recognize you, but it's not because you're walking around like Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Where it's like chest out and like, oh, that's because that's going to invite even more of that energy back, right? Which is like, oh, I know you're a baddie, but you think you are too. So now, if I'm feeling myself, but because you carry yourself in a way, I would imagine just that has people go, oh man, he looks like he's a cool guy. Not like I was telling John, one of the funniest things, you may have seen this clip that I've ever seen about this, is Tito Ortiz was on like Letterman. This is like 20 something years ago, right? And I this is like one of my favorite clips of all time. And Letterman's like, he says this. He's like, so man, you're this MMA, and this was him at the height of his powers, And he's like, do guys ever like want to, same thing you just said, like they have a challenge. And he's like, so he said, this is what I do. He's like, because it actually happens, here in New York every now and then. And I just thought, this is so good. He's like, so like let's say some guy's drunk, and it's a big guy, like he played football, he really kind of is feeling himself, and I'm sitting having a drink with some friends, and the guy comes over and he's like, hey man, you really think you're something, huh? And he's like in my face, and he's like, this is what I do every time. He goes, hey man, let me just ask you a question real quick before we do this. The guy's like, what? He's like, what do you do for a living? He's like, I'm a lawyer. He's like, great. He's like, how many hours a week you do that? He's like, I don't know, 60. He's like, great. He's like, you know what I do for a living? He's like, fight. He's like, yeah. He's like, you know how many hours I do that a week? He's like, 60. He's like, so we can do this, but all the time that you're lawyering, I'm fighting.
Yeah.
So he's like, and he's like, he said, every single time all right, whatever, man. And they walk off because it's like just the sheer math.
I've been training for this. I've been training for these
This
moments.
is what I do.
This would actually be a warm-up for me.
This is just a light.
This would be a
light
warm-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously, for me too, there's always the, like, I would always, what's really funny is, when I'm around a group of guys and I'm like the only fighter, right? And we're walking around, we're doing our thing. It's like, hey, we're good, man. We got Chandler with us. And it's like, hey, the funny thing is, with all due respect, if a fight breaks out, I'm the first guy who runs away. Now, if there's like a bad situation going on and I got to like help out, like I'm going to, that's way different than like a street fight is happening. It's like, because I ain't getting no favors in the court of law. Like, right. The judge is going to be like, this guy who fights in a cage for a living. I just looked up his YouTube highlights. Yeah. This guy looks like everything you're saying is a lie right now.
Yeah.
You definitely instigated this. And it's like, no, I swear I didn't.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm like, and I'm just like, I got a wife and kids to take care of, and like this is my life. Like this is what I do. So like I'm not trying to get into a street fight.
Right. And you got a job. You're like, I can't like get all scuffed up.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then like 2 weeks later I'm trying to jump in the Octagon.
Exactly. Well, that's why I don't play like rec sports. I don't play basketball. Like,
really?
Hey, do you guys want to go play some basketball? Nope. That's how people hurt. Like Chandler has to pull out of a fight. Oh, he hurt himself training? No, he was playing ultimate frisbee at his kids' field day.
So,
it's like,
this is something John and I also talked about that I would love to get your thoughts on, because like any sport, it has a shelf life.
Yep.
Like you said, that kind of question that you kind of go, God, is this like it? Is this it? I mean, how much have you thought about that? Like, do you spend a lot of time thinking about next season of life stuff you want to do then? Like, where is your head with that, with this kind of a job?
I do all the time. And I think it's mainly because our sport is very seasonal. Like, it's not seasonal in the sense that we have a fighting season. It's 365 days a year, but you can only fight 2-3 times a year. I had my first 2 years of fighting. I think I had like 6 fights in 13 months, which is like that's crazy. That's a lot of fights, but they were fast fights, quick, knock a dude out, go fight a month and a half later, 2 months later. But now it's like, hey, I fought in November, going to fight sometime this summer, and probably maybe November or December again. And it's also part of the sport. Like once you get to the top of the sport, the top 5, top 10 in the UFC, one of the well-paid guys, one of the well-known guys, they can only put you on the big cards. Yeah. And there's only one of those per month, and they got whatever it is, 10, 12 different championship fights that have to happen, and there's a bunch of different moving parts.
So is that the main reason that you can only fight 2 times a year, or is it a physical reason?
I think it's smart. If you want to be smart, physically, you only want to fight 2-3 times a year. You want to give yourself
because
some time.
You need so much recovery time.
Yeah, you want to give yourself time to, and not even just the body, like the brain. Yeah, you're going to get hit in the head, and it's not even necessarily the fight. It was the 8 weeks of sparring leading up to that, and man, if you're training right, you're sparring, 5 rounds for a 3-round fight, 8 rounds for a 5-round fight. You're really going. Make practice so hard that the fight becomes easier, type of thing. Mm-hmm. And you just want to give yourself some time off. And then, for me, I'm all in. When I'm in training camp, I'm all in. I'm not the best husband. I'm not the best father. I'm thinking about me. I'm thinking about my fighting career. Right? Like, so then when I completely disengage, then I can kind of fill up the father bucket and fill up the husband bucket, and then fill up the entrepreneurial bucket and fill up the creative bucket. And then give myself some time to heal up and enjoy time between fights and feel like a normal human being, because I become such a robot for that 12-week period, 8-week period, that I'm not this guy right now. I'm a different guy, and I know that, but I also know it's par for the course. It comes with the territory of the fighting. And I just want to be able to do as much as I can outside of training camps and take some time off. And then I think it fills up the cup to where you get that itch again.
Yeah.
You're like, man, I'm itching. I want to go do what I'm called to do.
So I would imagine too, as you're thinking about life after fighting, like there's got to be a part of it that's kind of exciting to go, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be that anymore.
Yeah.
Like headspace wise.
Yeah. I like the idea of just being on, and pouring myself into things for an entire year instead of like these short spurts. And then, like you're one person here when you're doing this and you're a different person here when you're doing that. From a mindset side of things. And then, really at some point when I do retire, I'll look back and 5 years into my next phase of life, and I'll say, hey man, all the connections and all the reputation and all the relationship capital that I've built up over the last 15 years of fighting has now turned into all of these things, and I miss that thing. I will definitely. There's no doubt. I'm always going to miss fighting, right?
For sure.
But making that transition of that significance of what you're doing and how you're doing it and who you're impacting and what you're doing with the talents that you were given. Obviously, you see a lot of guys, and not just in mixed martial arts, but sports in general. Like we as athletes completely underestimate how amazing of a life that we get to live while we're doing it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I always like my encouragement to younger guys. It's like, hey, you'll never ever regret the hard work and the dedication, the discipline that you put in. And you'll never ever regret, doing the extra interviews and the extra media and the extra appearances and the extra this and the extra that to build things, because there will come a time when those reporters stop calling. And there will come a time when you're not desirable in that arena. There will come that time. And you won't really know it until you get into that and say, man, how much did I squander the gifts while I had the opportunity? And that's just with anything in life,
So with your wife, like I saw this picture of y'all, like after one of the early fights, I think this is even pre-kids. And, it's just those photos are so funny because she looks so pretty and she's dolled up and then you just, you're just bleeding all in, you're smiling, and it's like a sweet pictures after one of your wins. What is it like? I mean, how does she navigate that? Knowing like I'm giving my husband to this sport that he's really good at, that he feels called to, but he just comes home like it's just completely mangled.
Well, so, I mean, I truly believe, and it's really funny because if you ask her, it's like she never wanted to be a professional athlete's wife ever. Like, and that's why it took me 2 years to get a date with her.
Because you were already doing it.
Oh yeah, I was already doing it. I was already world champ at that time.
Oh my gosh!
So she's thinking, okay, this guy.
So she knew exactly what was going on.
But she wasn't an MMA fan. Hadn't really seen a fight. Didn't really know about it. But so she was married to medicine. Like she was doing an 80-hour-a-week critical care residency at the University of Missouri ER, stitching up people and saving lives and doing lumbar punctures and central lines and all these crazy things. So she's not squeamish when it comes to that stuff, which is great. She stitched me up before. She's taken she's taken my stitches out. Like
That's amazing.
She's cool. I could be completely mangled, and she's like, well, I've seen way worse in the ER.
That
I've
is
seen
crazy.
Decapitated heads in the ER.
Jeez.
It's like, but it's more the emotional side of things, right? It's like you can hit me with a baseball bat in there, and I'll be fine. But like, when I fail, or I feel like I let people down, or I feel like I fell short of the potential that I have, that I've been given. That's where like the emotional side of it comes. And she knows how much I care, and she knows how much I want to provide, and she knows how much the wins and the losses don't mean that much to me, because I know it's all about just a living testimony of it all and the all-encompassing career.
Wow.
But she understands how much I fully pour myself into it, and she knows how much I want to win. And watching that failure with the person that you love more than anything it's so hard, but it's made us so close. We've been through so many of these things. Like, I mean, the crazy thing is we got married, and I think I won my first fight and I lost my next 3 fights. I was undefeated.
Holy cow.
Undefeated when we got together, world champion, and then I lost my next 3 fights, like won 1 fight and then lost 3 fights in a row. So much so where like we were living in San Diego. I lost my 3rd fight. We brought our bags in from the last fight I lost, and like sat down on the couch and just cried. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, I promised this girl I was going to take care of her and love her and provide for her. And here I am failing, and you're like, as a man, you're just like, this is what we do. We protect, we provide, we love.
And that's got to be so tough too, because like with tennis, if you lose, you're out of the tournament. There's another tournament in a week and a half.
That's the hardest.
I mean, you got to wait 6 more months.
That is, and I'm glad you said that, because I always talk about wrestling compared to mixed martial arts. Very similar, but the frequency in which you get the opportunity to get back in the win column is way different, right?
Wow.
Like in wrestling, it's like, just like you said, Wednesday I lose a dual meet. Okay. And my last performance was a loss, but on Saturday I get to wrestle again, and I get another opportunity to get back in the win column. Whereas mixed martial arts, I fought in November. I might not fight till June. Like, who knows? You're talking like 6, 7, 8 months in between. And then all of the licking of your physical wounds, the licking of your emotional wounds. Like, who am I? What went wrong? What can I change? What is my worth as a human being? How do all
it's
these different things? It's
probably a blessing, though, because I don't know. You have such a healthy grip on all of that. And maybe you wouldn't, because maybe you wouldn't have been forced to square up to it and really get to a healthy place if you could just keep staying on that hamster wheel of like, well, I'll just get a win next week.
Yeah.
And then that'll kind of put a Band-Aid on it.
Yep. Kind of like what we were saying earlier is like, who are you in your darkest of hours? Like at your greatest moment of opportunity, or your darkest hour, you have to answer the question, am I enough? And like, what am I doing here? Right. And going back to, you get married, lose those 3 fights in a row. I went 688 days without winning a fight.
Jeez Louise.
Wow.
That was the hardest time of my life at that point in time, but now it's given me such a fresh perspective on what the wins and the losses are and the mistakes that I made. I made 3 mistakes. Number 1, I was embarrassed and I hid from everything. Like, it was fight of the year. The first fight that I lost was fight of the year. And World MMA Awards, hey, we want you to come accept this big trophy and then get on the microphone and do the thing. I didn't answer that call. The reporters are calling, hey, leaving voicemails. Hey, I know you lost the fight, but hey, we'd really love to interview. Didn't answer that call. Didn't answer. They just hid from everything. I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to lose.
Wow.
Right? Wow. Didn't know how to lose in the sport because I was 13-0 or 12-0 at that time, and I became world champion, and I didn't know what it felt like. I was just like you said, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And I was building up this physical body, but I wasn't building up my mind and my spirit and my soul to be able to handle that adversity that was about to come. And then the second mistake was like, I forgot how good I was, right? I was just as good, just as skilled, just as dangerous the moment before that fight as I was the moment after that fight. Yet as soon as that loss happened, that result happened, that failure happened, and that's why I always say failure is an event, not a person.
Wow.
I'm a winner. I'm good at this sport. Yet that exact event right there made me believe, well, shoot, I lost all these skills, right?
Right.
And then the third mistake was like I started blaming other people. It's like, well, if the judges would have seen it this way, or if my coaches would have done this, or if this would have done that. You start pointing the finger and you find yourself in this little comfortable jail cell of self-pity, I call it, right? You're just sitting there, and then you think the door is locked, but the keys are sitting right in your hands, and you're like, all I have to do is just walk outside, right? And I made those mistakes, and I lived in turmoil for that first fight. That's when all the self-deprecating thoughts happened, and it led to the second loss, which led to the third loss, which really then I was like, man, I got to step up as a human being, as a man, as a husband at this time, and I believe God has called me for more than this, but I know my flesh is saying I'm not good anymore. Mm-hmm. So I really took stock in it all, and that's why I've been on such a journey to just learn who I am. And some people like me, some people don't like me, but I'm running my own race, and I've learned a lot about myself. And now when I lose, I know those mistakes. Like I always actually, Busting with the Boys. Have you heard of that in town? Yeah. So like they're friends of mine, and after every fight, win, lose, or draw, the last like 5 fights since I've been in the UFC, I go on the bus either Monday or Tuesday.
Oh,
and that's my way. And that's my way of not hiding.
I love that.
That's my way of not hiding. And I've gone on the bus like black eye, stitches, blood coming out my nose, And I've also been there after a really awesome win. But just getting back out there and realizing that number one, people don't care as much as you think they do. And number two, failures are a part of life. So therefore, let's go talk about them. Because as soon as you start talking about them, you become public about them, and you wear them on your sleeve, and you say, hey guys, here I am, the loser. I lost on Saturday night. Here's what went wrong. Here's what went right. I don't know what happens next, but I just took away the power.
There we go. I took away
the power of that loss.
That's exactly right. Do you and your wife have disciplines after your fights? Like, do y'all have things where like she knows, there's a thing in our world where like a friend of ours, Hal Andrews, who has a place called Porter's Call, they developed this thing called like How to Come Home. And it like they sat with artists and their spouses and basically were like, hey, here's some disciplines. Yeah. Like, don't talk about this like after you've been on tour. Like, don't have a serious conversation for 24 hours. Like, just try these ways to kind of go, how do you integrate? Yeah. Have y'all found that y'all sort of have these things you do, whether you know it or not?
That's a really, really great question because, the reintegration, you're just like, oh, they're married and this is what they do. But you're like, So for me, because I go to Florida for my training camps.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, you say, okay, well, she becomes a single mom for 8 weeks, let's call it, while she's also dealing with her husband being away, which part of that is like, hey, I could just love him and miss him, but that just sounds like crap. I'm going to feel like crap for 8 weeks and just think about missing him. So I'm just going to kind of maybe forget about him a little bit, like maybe just harden my heart a little bit. Like, hey, I'll see you on the weekends. And we'll,
Right.
And then for me,
Is that what y'all do, by the way? She comes down for the weekends with the kids?
No, I come back home on the weekends.
Oh, you come back home. Okay.
I made that decision whenever we adopted my first son, Hap. I was like, hey, if my career suffers because I want to fly home every weekend, so be it. Like, I'd rather be world champ dad than world champ fighter, right?
Man, come on.
But we have these things where, she's got to harden her heart. That sounds a little bit.
No, I know. I mean,
but it's like, well, hey, this is what I have to do. So I can sit around and wish things were different, or wish he was here, And then there's always things that happen during camps when I'm gone. It's like she gets a flat tire, she gets certain things. Every Wednesday morning, I've got my trash, and she's got to take the freaking trash down. And I'm like, every Wednesday morning I wake up and I'm like, gosh, I should be doing this. So there's these things. But then there's other days where you're like, it's okay. You got to do what you got to do. So you're both kind of like separating it a little bit just to cope, I guess, to shield yourself. So we find ourselves like that a lot too. It's like we get done with a fight and it's like, hey, we got to remember, like I know I love you for sure, but it's also like, hey, let's reintegrate back into this thing. And like you said, it's like even the parenting thing where it's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't parent the kids too much because you just got back. Just be the
absolutely.
Just be the
You're
fun.
jumping back into a system that's been going.
Yeah, and you're also kind of like trying to protect her a little bit because hey, you've had to do this for 8 weeks, so let me step up. And she's like, hey, actually, I don't think you should step up because like the kids also like missed you, so like why don't you just be the fun dad?
Yeah,
let that
that's
go
so
and
great.
let me handle that. Like, it's like, and it's so funny, right? We're talking about this quote unquote like superhuman guy, right? I'm out there and I'm fighting, I'm a big tough guy, right? But like these are the things that I have to deal with too, just like everybody does, like the things that everybody goes through. And just because I'm a quote unquote tough guy on TV doesn't mean I'm not just like this normal guy in a normal life.
So with your boys and soon to be girl, congrats.
Soon to be girl.
Yeah, congratulations.
That's amazing.
March 31st. Yeah.
Oh my God, soon.
Coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Wow. Jeez.
Exciting.
So how do you like? I'm trying not to ask all of like the most stereotypical questions.
No, it's good
with kids. Like, but how do you walk through? Because it is so public, they can watch you do it. Their friends can come to the school and be like, "Dude, your dad," like fist bumping, or like if you lose, they're like, "What happened?" Whatever. Mm-hmm. But what they see you do for a living is such a unique thing, right? How do you like? Because then it's like I have a million questions about like, are you big on like, hey, you need to know how to defend yourself at school because that's what, or like how do you talk about what you do with your boys?
It's a great question, right? And I think so right now I have Hap who's 8 and I have Ace he'll be 3 in April.
Okay.
And Ace, they both have seen it on TV. They both watched it, like, right? And Hap knows what I do. He's been to a fight. I mean, the funny thing is, even I'm almost the exact opposite. It's almost like, hey, dude, you can't get in a fight in school because, like, the teachers would be like, well, the kid who's got the fighter dad thing, So I'm not trying to turn him into a pacifist to get walked all over, but it's like, hey,
gotta be careful.
And it's funny. Like
so funny.
I have these moments because I can be completely honest and candid with my kid more than I would be with like you. I wouldn't be like, hey, dude, I'm one of the baddest dudes on the planet. But but it's kind of cool to like talk to your son about it and be like, hey, buddy, like I really am like. I'm one of like the baddest dudes on the planet, right? And I can protect you and mommy better than a lot of people, right? Yeah. But we don't do that unless we absolutely have to protect people, right? Yeah. So it almost gives me even more of a leeway to talk about like using it in the right way, right? Yeah. And even the like when Jordan Peterson talks about like being dangerous, and the guy's like, wait, we should be dangerous, and he's like, hey, you should be dangerous, but then you should be able to harness it and know when to use it, right?
Yeah.
So like I love what I get to do, and I love being dangerous, I guess, right? But I don't really think about it. But I think just teaching them how to be good men, is like the most important thing to me. And what is a good man?
Yeah.
What do we stand for? We are the Chandlers, and this is who we are. This is how we act. This is what we believe in. And this is what I believe about you. Like teaching my children to believe in themselves because I didn't get that as a child.
Yeah.
Amazing parents, loving parents. I had safety, I had security, I had a roof over my head. My parents both worked their tails off. Amazing people, but I was never truly told, hey, you're Michael Chandler and you can go do anything that you want. You know, like I want my kids to believe that they can do anything that they want.
Hey, Dave.
Hey.
Listen, our friends at GoodRanchers.com, they've got a haunting stat for you. Okay, you ready for this?
No, not really. But
Over 140,000 family farms in the U.S. have closed down since 2017. Can you believe that?
Ugh, that is heavy. But John, listen, this spring, it's time to spring into action. You're welcome. And put American farms first with GoodRanchers.com.
That's right. Their commitment to 100% American meat means no shortcuts, no compromises, and no questionable imports. With GoodRanchers.com, you'll get high-quality beef, chicken, pork, and wild-caught seafood that is free from antibiotics or added hormones or seed oils. It's clean, simple, and exactly what you deserve.
But John, it's more than just meat.
That's
it's
right.
a way to give back.
That's
With
right.
every box you order, Good Ranchers donates a portion of their proceeds to paralyzed veterans of America. Supporting our veterans is just one way they honor the values that make this country great.
Right now, Good Ranchers is running their Spring into Action promotion, so you and your family can support local ranchers and easily get American quality delivered right to your door.
That's right. To invest in American farms, support our veterans, and get high-quality meat that upholds the values of tradition, visit GoodRanchers.com and use our code DADVILLE to claim your free meat and $25 off.
Let's support what makes this country great: American values, American farmers, and American quality. Listen up. Free bacon, ground beef, bacon again, seed oil-free chicken nuggets, or salmon in every order for a year, plus $25 off with the code DADVILLE.
Good Ranchers, American meat delivered.
Hey friends, I'm Annie F. Downs, author, speaker, podcaster, and part of the That Sounds Fun network. And I'm a big fan of seeing God move in our everyday lives. Can we talk for a second about what it really means to be a person of faith? It's waking up every day and choosing to trust Him, even when life feels uncertain. It's standing firm in truth, walking in grace, and knowing that God is always with us. But I know staying rooted in faith is not always easy. At least it isn't for me. And that's why I love Glorify, the #1 Christian devotional app designed to help you start, grow, and strengthen your relationship with God every single day. One of the things I love about Glorify is the amount of options available to me through the app every day. Not only does it help me kick off my time with God with their daily devotional, but there's a song of the day to listen to and a community of other users available to engage with. It's really cool. With Glorify, you can begin your morning in scripture, reflect with the daily devotional, and end the day with the daily walk with God, this immersive experience that quiets your heart and refocuses your spirit. It's one of my favorite hacks, something simple but powerful that keeps you anchored when life gets busy. And since we're shining a light on women this month, let's celebrate the strength, faith, and stories of women who inspire us every day. And for the men listening, think about how you're uplifting the women of faith in your life. Join me and over 20 million believers who have found encouragement through Glorify. Download the app today at glorify-app.com/podcast, and let's keep walking in faith together. Again, that's glorify-app.com/podcast.
Do they have a hard time with like when you come home beat up?
No.
Or are they able to kind of know, have you been able to say, hey, this is the job?
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Like,
I always remember like the first time it happened. And I remember my son Hap's face. He was just like, I walked in and he's like, walks up to me or runs up to me and gives me the hug and then like pulls his head back and he looks at me and his face was like, oh, and he was like, just like mesmerized. And he's like, black eye, cut over here, black eye, you like scrape over here. And now he's gotten kind of used to it. And I don't know, man. I think it's just it is our life, right? So we're living it. So it's so normal to us, right? But it's more like being able to talk to them about like, hey, this is what Daddy does, and hey, I won or I lost, and it's like.
Is there a key? I'm asking every question, John. This is just because I'm so excited.
Go for it.
Don't be mad.
I'm getting angrier and angrier.
You guys want to get
there
out?
will be a fight.
You guys want to do takedowns? You guys want to do takedowns in the backyard? I got you guys.
The other thing that I wanted to say to that point is like, is there a community, like when I think about why first, like, but then with your kids, like within the MMA, or let's just say, forget UFC, like the MMA, is there sort of a community in that where like wives know each other and, you know, y'all have ways you can be together? Or is it kind of like, because I was understanding the opposite, which would be like, hey, we're kind of fighting each other.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like you want to be cool. To your point,
Yeah.
like you said, that UFC is appreciate how kind and human and wonderful you are. But that fascinates me. Is that something like, how does that work?
We have some friends in the industry, but it's not a ton. You know, I mean, like obviously we have our teams. Like we have our team in Florida, but we don't live there. So like if we lived there, we would probably hang out with them more, right? But then we have my management group. Like I have my managers, my longtime managers, and we have all the guys that are under there, and we're all friends, and we're
because they manage other fighters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got a really tight-knit group of guys that we've had for my entire career, and we're probably closer to them than we are like other fighters. And yeah, in the weight classes, it's like, well, I mean, you can't be friends with freaking Poirier's wife. You can't be friends with Gaethje's wife. This guy's wife was like, we're probably gonna fight him. I already did fight him. I'm gonna have to fight him again. You know, like, whereas like if you're like, hey, you're a heavyweight, we could be friends with you, or you're a 125, or we could be friends with you.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like I could walk into the room of like the entire UFC roster, and like every single one of them is either younger than me, and they look up to me, or like they're direct like same level peers with me, or like even above me, and like I'm cool with everybody. I like to be the guy where I'm just like I'm cool with everybody.
Yeah.
And like it's what's unique to, or not unique, but it's what feels comfortable for me. Maybe I just like to be liked.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not trying to have any kind of confrontations, and if I got to fight you, I got to fight you, whatever.
Do you find that there's like a common sort of trait amongst all the fighters that you have come in contact with? Is there some sort of like common thread, or a lot of them surprisingly like more like you, where they're not confrontational people?
100%. I think that is the biggest misconception, where it's
wow.
like, it's almost like, it's almost like I don't know, maybe you're like, hey, like I do music all the time, and it's like if you were always hanging out with people like, hey, Dave, pick up the guitar, like do it. And he's like, I'll do it, but it's like I just want to like sit back and like watch the football game. Let's not talk about music or whatever. Where it's like with fighting, it's like we fight all the time, we train all the time, we're constantly pushing ourselves, and everything we do is hard. So it's like when I'm doing something, leisurely, or when I'm hanging out with buddies, it's like, yeah. These guys, you would be very surprised. So many of them are so much less confrontational than you think. Probably even like, maybe it's like making up for it. Maybe it's, we all know, we walk into, quote unquote, walk into a room, and it's like, hey, everyone's like, watch out for that guy. Cauliflower ears, scars under his eyes. Like, watch out for him. Like, he must be one of those guys. So maybe we like overcompensate a little bit to be extra nice, or maybe it really is just like, I believe, John Eldridge, remember the book Wild at Heart, right? Every man needs a battle to fight, and an adventure to have, and a beauty to win, right? And it's like, I got my battle to fight all the time physically, and that is also an adventure, right? So it's like, so when you have that happening all the time, it's like outside of the fighting stuff, you're like, I want no confrontation whatsoever. I want everything to be easy and leisurely and copacetic and joyful and fun and peaceful and content.
Well, it's something, and this is kind of back to the beginning of what we were talking about, is like Annie and my wife and I, for a few years, watched The Ultimate Fighter. This is years ago when it was like really happening. And something we would always comment, like she liked it as much, that her funny thing was the minute anybody bled, she's like, I got to leave the room. But she was into it. Like, she loved all the ever. But something we both noticed is there was always such a big discrepancy. This is early days. It was like 15 years ago. So it's still kind of like.
I just saw Forrest Griffin yesterday. Did you remember that one? That was like the one fight that set the UFC to the
exploded.
moon.
But what you'd see when those guys were all living in those houses together is to John's point, you kind of would see like a very clear line between guys who were crazy, like you could tell were battling a lot of demons, and this is the way that they got that out of their system. And then guys that were like you, who were like, I wrestled, I was really good at wrestling. This thing is now kind of this viable sport that I can make money in, and I'm really disciplined, I'm really good at it, I'm here to fight, and then I kind of want to just like meet some guys and have fun.
Yeah.
And you would see in the house the difference of those guys. And I think what's so fascinating about where the sport is now, and I think why it is so big and successful, is it's almost like it naturally weeds out people who are not professional or able to keep it between their ears. The guys who are like, 1,000%. I just want to fight all the time, because they're not. And then guys like you who are like, I'm really good at this. I have a discipline around it. I have a team that works with me. I have training that, and it really has become a sport. Yep. It's not sort of like the place where all the crazy guys with like, parent wounds or whatever would show up and be like, I'm going wear somebody out tonight.
Yeah.
You know,
And even now, right? Like too, you're like, hey, if some dudes walked in here and it was like, hey, this guy fights all the time in the streets, dude. You should have saw him last week and had this bar fight. He should get into mixed martial arts. It's like, that's not really happening anymore,
that's
right?
right.
It's
That's
not
exactly
like,
right.
hey, you love to fight, dude. You were called to this. It's like, no, actually, unfortunately, like you'd be worse than like the guy who's never been in a fight, because there's so many more, you call it like peaceful warriors, joyful warriors in it and doing it for the sport, more than there is the guy who's like, hey man, like I gotta hit something. I gotta hit something.
exactly
You
right.
know, like,
Right.
and I'm somewhat like that too, but it's not like this anger. I gotta hit something. For me, it's more like I have to like work out. I know if I go a week without training or a week without pushing myself or whatever, it's like I get a little antsy and I need to exert myself.
Yeah.
But it's not like, hey, I need to punch something. Where's a punching bag? Like, I might punch a hole. You like that fence? I might punch a hole in that fence.
I need to punch something as a thought.
Do you enjoy the actual fights themselves?
Watching them?
No, like
Or
the
fighting?
fights that you fight in.
Man, that's a
Isn't
really,
that a great? That's a great question.
It's a great question because I think if you watch me, man, I'm in there smiling, like I'm bleeding. I'm like, and you could just tell like this guy likes what he's doing, right? But when you ask me, Michael, I always say like there's two different guys. Like there's the guy who fights in the cage, right? And he can't be trusted. He's kind of a psychopath. But then you got
Don't
me.
open that cage.
Yeah, like this guy, like who's sitting here. Like I don't know if I really love it that much, but I know when I'm in it, I love it and I turn into a different person. And I've talked about this, how like I truly believe the way God designed me is like I am two different people when it comes to it, right? Like on one side of it, you're like fight of the year, bleeding, fighting, like is willing to die inside of the octagon to do what he does, and he does it well. But then when you take him out of that and you are over here, you're like, this guy's the exact opposite of that, and he's peaceful, joyful. Like, am I competitive? Yes, but like I'm not so competitive that I have to win everything, and I'm not like win at all costs kind of guy. And I'm a little intense when I train, but overall, when I'm outside of those training sessions, I'm just like, I just want to chill, like be normal and be, and I'd rather be known as like a good dude than a good fighter, you know, a good father and a husband than like a good world champion. And that's why, you know, I don't know, maybe that's hindered me at times, but I also just think that's just the way I was created. And it's worked out pretty darn well now. And I think that dichotomy between the two is why I can somewhat be, you know, an anomaly in the sport in a lot of ways, because I'm not the guy with the red hair and the, you know, punching a wall and whatever. It's like I'm like the exact opposite of what people think a fighter is. Like the greatest compliment is when you get done with a conversation, people are like, man, like I can't imagine you fighting in a cage with this conversation we just had. I can't imagine. Like
I definitely feel that
I
way.
never thought that you would be this way when we had this conversation. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. It's just who I am. It's who God created me.
So I have one last nerd. Unless you got another one, I've got one last nerdy question before our speed round. So with training, I think about the MMA, and you know you have these different martial arts, right? You know, obviously, but
do you? Do we have?
Well,
those
just
different-
stay with
Tell
me.
them.
So
Are
we
they mixed
okay.
martial
Let me
arts?
walk through.
Keep going.
We have karate.
Karate.
And then boy, all the trees off the roots. Okay, so we have then after. No, but like, are you? This is really interesting to me, but it may be a really dumb question. For all of the years that has been around, for all the years that the MMA has been around, so when you're training, are you still learning things?
Yeah, but I think it's more these days, like after 15 years in the sport, right? It's more just like I've learned who I am and I've learned who I'm not, right? And you find yourself. Like who am I? You always call it like a white belt mentality or like the walk-on mentality. Like I walked onto Mizzou and it's like, hey, I'm the worst guy here, the lowest guy on the totem pole. My brain is a sponge and I got to learn everything. And that's how I got into mixed martial arts, and I still have this open mind. But if coach next week's like, hey man, we're really going to work on your spinning back kicks. And I'm like, dude, there's a 1% chance I land this. And like, I wouldn't be that great at it. Like, let's just work on the very basics, like being brilliant with the basics. So, I mean, one of the greatest fighters in the world right now is a guy named Ilia Topuria, who's the 145 champion, and he is not flashy. Matter of fact, he doesn't even do much. He throws like 4 punches, and he's got good takedown defense, and he's decent on the ground, but he's got dynamite in his hands. He throws a jab, a hook, an uppercut, and like an elbow maybe. Like, it's very brilliant with the basics, right? And I'm more that guy where I'm like, I don't want to complicate it. I don't want my coach saying have 35 different things in the arsenal. It's like, let's talk about like 4 things, and let's find the easiest path to victory that plays within my strengths.
Yeah.
So it's a great question because it's mixed martial arts. You got to be ready for everything, but and you have this huge disposal. There's like not very many rules. You can't punch them. You can't punch them in the nuggets, and you can't bite them, and you can't eye gouge. And
right.
It's kind of about it.
Yeah.
You know, like, so you can do anything. Like your whole body is a target almost, and you can hit it however you want. But for me to be successful, like just being brilliant with the basics and just fine tuning those things. If I went into Florida tomorrow and started a training camp, we'd be picking up doing the exact same thing that we did the last training camp with a little bit of nuance based upon a new opponent, but it's
But it's not going to be like, they're like, let's say you flat, like this fight gets booked that you're going to do. And you get in, your coach is like, sit down.
Yeah.
We found a new move.
Exactly.
We
found a new submission. And you're
saw
like,
this on YouTube.
Or someone's like, I was in the jungles of Brazil.
Yes,
and we
exactly.
came upon a tribe who, that's not happening, right? Yeah. Like, you're not, I mean, those days of where you get in and somebody's like, I literally have a new thing. And you're like, when you get down, pull this, move this arm, hit, and you're like, oh my, like that's not happening anymore, right?
No, and it's because it's a great question, because as the sport continues to grow, you get more people who come into it, and there's these very intricate questions about, I think the sport, to me, doing it every day, like the sport is less fantasizing or like less remarkable than people think it is. They blow it up to be like it's so complicated, and really, if you boil it all the way down to like competition and like being brilliant with the basics, there's certain little outliers, but for the most part it's more about timing and footwork and distance, and then it's about imposing your will on the opponent, and it's about the cardio, and it's about strength, and it's not like, hey dude, we're going to do this new move or completely change things. Like, and I think that's why I've gone through probably 4 different camps throughout the year, like 4 different teams, right? Maybe 3 or 4. And this one works the best for me because my coach, I believe, is the greatest striking coach on the planet.
Oh, wow.
Kickboxing, boxing, in my opinion. And the reason I think that is because he would never be like, hey, dude, I was on YouTube and I really think we should completely change your style. It's like, no, man, let's just keep doing what we're doing. He always said, he actually made sure to just say, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Like just keep it simple. Like, let's keep it as simple as possible. Let's be trained. Let's do everything right. And let's show up on fight night and hope for the best. And like, let's just be very
Have
brilliant
you,
with the basics.
last, I swear this is the really last dumb question that we're going to do speed around on purpose. Have you had to fight somebody that's like a kickbox, like a kick guy? Those guys are the guys, if there's one guy that I would dread, it's the guys like, and these, if it's on freaking Facebook, I always watch them because it's the ones I'm like, where they just wear your leg out.
Yeah, the kicks, and there's the one thing like we just made the joke about like, hey, we found this new thing. Like so we know what a leg kick is. You kick the leg, but traditionally you kick above the knee, so you kick the big belly of the quad, which can really debilitate you. After a couple of them, you don't really feel it a ton. You don't feel a ton of pain, but you can feel your foundation becomes more immobile. But we really started doing a lot more of these calf kicks where you kick below the knee and above the ankle, and you're kicking that calf. So like the calf, Oh no, and it is the most painful thing probably in mixed martial arts now, and the quickest debilitating strike. Like you can take one of those, and you might like those power bars in like Street Fighter.
Yeah,
like,
you see them deflate,
deflates a little bit. So you really got to be able to defend those things, and if you can land them really well, it's a very, very good tool.
I mean, those, and you can see in those moments 2 things happening. The guy kicking is like, this is working.
Yeah.
And you see the guy on the other side's like, oh, this is working.
Yeah.
And then he's trying to close him down.
And the crowd is like, oh, that's working. And Joe Rogan's like, that definitely worked.
But you see him trying to get closer. They can't kick him.
Yeah.
But like that's one of the few times that I think where guys will like, just like I literally can't stand up. So we either got to go to ground or.
Yeah. So I fought a guy named Justin Gaethje. It was Fight of the Year 2021. He made at least 2 guys quit via leg kicks. Like you just chopped and chopped.
So what do you do to prep for that?
Well, I mean, we've learned a certain technique the way that I do to like pull the leg back at the right time, and it's a timing thing. Like right now, if I haven't trained it in a couple months and I go down to Florida, I'm going to get leg kicked, and I'm like, okay, that hurts. Freaking hey, thank God you're wearing shin guards. But then a couple weeks in, like it's just like anything, reaction time, and it's
God, that's crazy.
It's kind of like get back riding a bike. You get back on the bike, and you're like, okay, I'm a little bit wobbly, but then like a couple minutes later, you're like, okay, I remember how to do this.
I just think, I mean, all of it's amazing and fascinating. But those guys, I'm like, I really think if I did what you did, they would be the guys. I'm like, do we have to do this fight?
Yeah,
because he's just gonna wear.
I think I would just be like, they would be showing me, all right, how about this guy? I'm like, no,
that's kind of
next. Scroll. Yeah. How about this guy? Oh, he punches. No.
Yeah,
this guy, he's a kicker. No, I don't want to fight him.
He's quote unquote. He's a kicker.
He's a kicker. He's a big kicker. So,
do you feel the pain during the fights? Or is it not till after that you start to they start to emerge and you're like, oh, what happened over here?
Not a lot. And I've made the joke like I wish I did feel pain more in fights, because I think I would fight a little bit more cautiously, like a little bit more defensively, a little bit more, hey, keep your hands up, because you get hit and you're like, oh, well, I didn't feel it. I mean, I felt it, but it didn't really hurt.
It'll hurt in an hour, but it's not hurting right now.
After the fight, as soon as that adrenaline wears down, I mean, about 20 minutes later, you're like, ooh, the foot.
And what do you do? Are you in like an ice bath immediately afterward? What do you do to recover? Or do you have to assess all right, let's see what happened to you?
Other than John McLaughlin and Dave Martin's music.
Yeah, just put a shit on, just listen.
Which that'll probably take care of most of it, but for that last 10%,
That last 10%, I wish I did have access to a cold plunge right after. That would be probably cool. Although my body might freak out. A lot of crazy things happen with the body. I've peed blood before numerous times. I've peed green before.
That's interesting.
Your sinuses are all jacked up because you either hurt your nose or you bloodied your nose. You got punched in the face, so you got the sinus drainage. You got all of the, it's your body just basically went through a car crash. If you fought 20, my last fight was 25 minutes. It's a long time to be fighting in an octagon, on high alert, fight or flight.
Right.
So your body's just...
It's just your nervous system, too, is just coming down.
And what's really funny is normally after a fight, it's really hard to sleep. Either I won and I'm on top of the world. I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I'm laying in bed and my wife's sleeping because she's like, oh, thank God it's over. I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm like, okay, what's going to happen next? Or after a fight, I'm like, oh my gosh, is it over? Am I never going to be able to fight again? Cut me? Am I a loser? Am I not a loser? All those normal human thoughts.
Right. I would think one of the most painful moments would be waking up the next morning, just physically.
Yeah. Trying to walk to the bathroom,
taking a shower, taking your kid to school and just sort of limping up. Hey guys,
it is funny. I always go in the school line and it's I got a black eye or whatever, but
that is
but I do love that. It's whether no matter what it is you do, we're all just parents and we get out, we're doing the exact same thing.
I would give so much money at the school your kids go to, which we're not going to say safety. That the first time you went, it was after a fight, and the dads are kind of pouring in
yeah. You just say nothing.
Okay, Mike, what do you do for a living? Mike, man, I'm just doing insurance.
You got 3 black eyes.
How did you even get 3 black eyes? How is it even possible? Well, it is funny too because the last one I lost, so it was probably the Tuesday or Wednesday after the fight. I brought the kids to school, and nobody really said anything though because I lost the fight, right?
Yeah.
But then 2 fights before that, I won the fight, and then people were like, "Hey, dude, good to see you. Congratulations! I watched it. Which is really funny about mixed martial arts in general. I watched it with my grandma, or your grandma's my grandma's you're my grandma's favorite fighter, or and you realize the demographic of mixed martial arts is bigger than you think it is. It's not just it's not just 18 to 35 males.
No,
that's the bulk of it. But though it is funny, the way people treat you, just with anything. What do you say to somebody after they lose? How do you handle it all? So it's definitely an interesting thing to drop the kids off at school. But I love it. Here I was showing up. I'm like, here I am.
Or just watching, a basketball practice on the side, just with, gauze in your ear and nose or something, just a thumbs up.
Yeah, we're having a conversation. He's like, hey, man, your nose is bleeding. I'm like, oh, sorry. Oh, okay, sorry.
That's
what happened. It's been going on for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
so.
Sorry, man. Just keep talking. I'll fix it. Okay. All right, so this is a speed round. Okay. So buckle up. These are, pun intended, heavy-hitting questions.
That's free. Nice.
That's free. Okay, first one. What is your favorite thing about what you do?
Being in the public eye for everybody to see.
Wow.
Yeah. I think
Interesting.
being in the public eye for everybody to see like the successes and the failures, especially because the stakes are so high, and not to downplay any other thing where people are on a stage or in an arena in the public eye, a football field, whatever it may be. But like, I just love what I get to do because it's freaking hard. And it's the highs are so high and the lows are so low.
Mm-hmm. All right, what's the least favorite thing about what you do?
Cutting weight.
Oh,
Cutting
what
weight.
a
I wondered
fascinating
if you would
answer.
Cutting weight for sure. I mean, if we could fight without cutting weight, life would be so much better.
Has that changed? Like, has that become way more regulated to whatever extent you can
It's
regulate it?
become regulated a little bit more. They've tried to put in little protocols and these things, but ultimately we're all just left to our own devices. But I've been cutting weight since I was 14 years old, and it's like 38 now. I'm like, man, I've been doing it for a long time. I've been competing in the 150s since my senior year of high school.
Good night.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so like I wrestled 152 my senior year, and I wrestled 157 in college, and I've been fighting 155 for 15 years, and it's
And when you're not training, when you're here in Nashville, is there like your body wants to be 165 or whatever?
no, my body likes to be like 185.
What?
Oh my gosh.
185. Yeah. And when I've gotten bigger and a little bit fluffier, I'm like 190, like 190.
That would be my class, by the way. They're like, we got the 155, 185. We got fluffy.
We got the one
bars
fluffy.
is in that one. And the
The
one
one
fluffies.
The 150 fluffies. 155 and the 150 fluffies.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah,
That is 30 pounds
so
more.
much weight.
yeah. I just did a DEXA scan too. So the DEXA scan kind of looks at all of your body fat, all of your muscle mass, all of your bones, ligaments, joints, all like basically your organs, your entire body, right? So it just kind of extracts it all, and then you kind of do a math problem on like, hey, we need to lose this much body fat, we can cut this much water weight. It's mainly the water weight at the end of a weight cut that's the toughest thing. God created us for like to have oxygen, food, and water, and you're like not having a lot of food and not having a lot of water. Thank God I got some oxygen.
So how much time do you have? Like, you have to be 155 or whatever it is at this time on a Wednesday.
9 a.m. on Friday. 9 to 11 a.m. is usually Friday morning weigh-ins, and then we would fight Saturday night. So it's about 36 hours.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
And how much when does the cutting start?
Well, for me, the cutting starts. The dieting hard starts like 8 weeks out. So that's when I clean everything up and kind of eat perfectly for 8 weeks. And then, the quote unquote cut itself is more when you're doing the water manipulation and you're pulling the water out. There's like that last week. But I get myself down to about 5% body fat and like get my body weight down to like 170. And then that last 15 pounds is water. You'd be surprised how much weight we could lose in one day.
Did you see him look at me? He's like, I could do it all.
No. We could probably lose like 15 pounds in one day if we really wanted to.
Are you serious?
We could do it.
And is it still the old school?
But it's all water weight.
It's all water weight. It's all water weight these days.
It's
all bare beer.
Is it still the old school, like trash bags on a like stationary bike?
Yeah. So I mean, no, because that's really just the water weight that we're losing when you're doing that kind of stuff. The sauna suits, we call them. But then for the actual weight cut itself, I do hot bath, sit in a hot bath, and I'll lose like 5 pounds in 45 minutes. In a hot bath. Or like one of those lay down saunas where you lay in it and you put the sauna over top of you and it's like 100 degrees or something, and you just kind of sweat it out. It's the best way when you're calorie depleted and dehydrated to not exert yourself.
Oh yeah.
Because I could lose 8 pounds in a workout, but that's like a hard workout.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to do a hard workout when my body's running on fumes.
I think it's amazing how quickly you answered that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
You'd be like, what's the hardest? Oh yeah, cutting weight.
Yeah. It's the worst part about the sport. It's like, you deprive yourself of what, like, literally what human beings need.
What your body wants. Yeah.
Now, granted, we've all seen people have bad weight cuts. We've seen fights get canceled because a guy passes out on a scale.
I mean, it's probably the most dangerous part of the sport.
Yeah,
probably.
It is. And that's why, for me, it's all about weighing the pros and cons between hey, I'm doing what I'm doing, but I know it's damaging to my body. So what safeguards can I put in, and what disciplines can I add to make sure it's the least amount of detrimental to my body? And for me, if I'm able to just stay disciplined for a good 12-week period, but then super, super disciplined for 8 weeks, the weight comes off, and I do it like a professional. I just do it like a professional, and that's where I get so. When I see somebody miss weight, I've never pulled out of a fight, and I've never missed weight.
Wow.
In my entire life, like never in wrestling, and never.
That's
in
amazing.
24 years of hand-to-hand combat, I've never done it. So I don't have
combat.
any.
That's so cool.
That's
cool.
I don't have any sympathy for people who don't. Because it's just like the weight cut didn't start. The day before weigh-ins. The weight cut started 3 months ago.
But would you prefer if they would come in and say, like, hey, here's the new rule, which forget about how hard this would be to enforce it, but if they could hypothetically come in and be like, guys, look, you can do your weight cut through training, through your diet and all that kind of stuff, and get down to 170, and then that's it. You can't do the crazy 24-hour water weight stuff anymore.
Yeah,
would you prefer that?
I would. I mean, and it's so then people could also say, well, why don't you just fight 170, right? And it would be great to fight 170. The problem is those guys are cutting from 205 down to 170.
Yeah, everybody's
the guys
doing
at 155 are going from 190 down to whatever. So you're like, and those guys are a little bit taller. Those guys are all 6 foot and above. So you're like, well, I wouldn't have that height. So then it's like two different weight classes. Because I would love to fight at 170. And then there's definitely some guys at 170 that I would take fights with. When I was supposed to fight Conor McGregor, our fight was going to be at 170. So I was really looking forward to that.
Because that would have worked because y'all about the same size.
Yeah.
So
we're both 155 pounders.
Yeah.
He's a 155 pounder, but he, does a lot of extracurricular things outside of
Yeah.
mixed martial arts. So he's like, well, I don't want to cut weight and I'm rich.
Yeah.
So I'm like, 170 would be great. I'll fight you at 185. I don't care because we're the same size.
That's so fast. Okay. So I'm cheating because I'm going to add one. What is the first thing you want to eat after you've gotten over the fight? What's the first cheat thing? Do you have something you're always like, yes?
Pizza's always,
that's on
pizza's
there.
like the thing, right? But the problem is I literally haven't had pizza for like 3 months.
I was going to say,
so then you're like, do I want to put myself through this? I would love to just have like a nice big, like the biggest steak I could find in whatever city I'm in, and a nice big sweet potato and some veggies, and because you don't want to shock the system too much.
I was going to say that would be the thing because you do that.
I have the cravings. Like we all have our cravings, like burger and fries. And, ice cream.
It would be hysterical if you retired in whatever 5-10 years, and then I don't see you for a minute. And next time I see you, you're like 210.
Yeah,
you're just like you're like, oh wow, you really got back into the pizza. Huh?
Yeah, you're in the fluffy division.
Back in the fluffy.
150 fluff.
150 fluffy.
Okay, fight you wish you'd been able to see in person to watch, like a legendary fight.
It's a good question. Probably that Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar fight. That's kind of like one of those legendary ones. Kind of the
you said that was the one that started the whole thing.
Yeah, because that was the Ultimate Fighter finale on Spike TV, I believe, where everybody watched it. It was on free cable TV, and it was just a crazy fight that took the UFC to the next level. But then there's been so many great fights since then, man. Like Conor McGregor versus Khabib would have been a really fun one because there was like this big Ireland versus like the Muslim Russian Dagestani community, and like there was a big fight after the fight that happened inside the Octagon. Watching like George St. Pierre, like he was just such an awesome professional. Just
I think I was a clinician, man.
The Canadian cat's meow, man. Like he was just freaking. He was the total package.
That's what they used to call me on the dance floor. By the way, Canadian cat's meow.
All right, if you weren't in the MMA, what else would you have done?
If I think about my road of what I would have done, I probably would have been a college wrestling coach.
Oh wow,
yeah. Now I got my degree in personal financial management services with a emphasis in real estate, and I've invested well and got some real estate properties and done well in that arena. But I do love college wrestling. Like I don't love the lifestyle. Like now knowing, like having my wife and kids and like fully dedicating myself to that because they just train three times a day and it's just nonstop. I wouldn't want that lifestyle, but I love the idea of you got these young, impressionable 18 to 22-year-old kids who have no idea the opportunity that they have in front of them and the regret that they will have if they don't pour all of themselves into this little opportunity that you've been given. And the amount of people that have been gone to the next phase of their life and looked back and been like, man, I wish I would have taken that opportunity. I wish I would have squandered those gifts. I feel like I could be that guy who could be that guy who would make sure you hold these guys accountable, because the future you will thank yourself for pouring yourself fully into this thing, you know?
Wow.
Because I think the 5 years where I was at Mizzou completely changed my life, and I wouldn't be here where I am today without the 5 years within those four walls of the Hearn Center in Columbia, Missouri, where I spent thousands and thousands of hours.
God, that's so interesting.
That would be fun.
Okay, final question. If you wrote a book about being a dad, what would it be called?
The things they didn't tell you about being a dad.
I would buy that.
You know, it's
I would buy that.
You know, and or maybe something like what would it be about, or what would it be called? It would be called. My next two would be like your greatest mission in life. You know, like your greatest mission in life is being a father. And then also, you're doing better than you think.
Yes.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
it would just be chapter after chapter of like, hey, dude,
just validation.
You're doing better than you think you are. Like, I know.
Just said in different ways.
I know you're laying in bed right now with your head on the pillow, looking at the ceiling, thinking about all the things you said and did and didn't do. But, dude, you're doing a great job. Like, you're doing a really great job. And someday you're going to be sitting in a rocking chair at 90 years old thinking, man, why did I think I was screwing this thing up so badly, right?
I know. Well, isn't it? I feel like David Thomas or Stephen James, one of the therapists we've had on, basically says, if you are worried about how you're doing, that's the tell that you're probably doing a better job.
That's what I always say to, because I do love the platform that I've been given and how people will reach out to me via whatever, Instagram or like on our podcast, where like people just ask questions for like that are hard hitting questions about being a dad or being a husband or whatever. And it's like, that's what I do always say to people who are like, hey man, I'm going to be a dad, or hey, I got my 3-year-old, or this, that. And it's always just like, hey man, even just by asking this question, like even choosing this question, this opportunity to ask me something instead of like, hey dude, how do I get a 6-pack abs? Or hey dude, how do I become a millionaire? It's like the fact that you even ask this question lets me know, and it should validate to you and let you know that you're on the right track, you know? Yeah. Just caring, man. Just caring.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But
dude, this has been such a great conversation.
Well, thanks so much.
I so appreciate your time.
I mean, truly like years in the making.
Years in the making.
We've been trying to make this happen for like 3 years, so thank you.
Of course, man. Thank you guys.
Now, if you can just judge me and John,
let's do this.
Ding, ding, ding.
Dum, dum, dum. Dadville.
What if more important than being right is how we handle being wrong? Holding tightly to ideas that can't adapt with new information is not a virtue, it's a vice. I'm Heather Thompson-Day, and I'm inviting you to join me over on my podcast, What If I'm Wrong?, where I'll be your guide through real-life questions.
Okay, today we have a submission story, and it is wild.
Subscribe to What If I'm Wrong?, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Ever feel like the pressure to lead well is pulling you in 100 different directions? Like you're running on empty but can't afford to stop? I'm Tony Miltenberger, host of Follow to Lead, a Christian leaders podcast. And my mission is to help Christian leaders become more conscious and intentional, rooted in faith, grounded in values, and secure their identity in Christ. We do this every single week through interviews with some of the world's best leaders who share their insights on personal growth, resilience, and faith-filled leadership. Plus, I offer quick monologue episodes that cut straight to the core of the issues that you're facing every single day. Whether it's releasing control or leading through uncertainty or just finding peace in the midst of the chaos. If you're ready to lead with clarity, confidence, and deeper connection to your faith, join me on Follow to Lead. That's follow the number 2 lead wherever you get your podcasts, or connect with me on Instagram @TWMill.